Hi, Candidate here. Today we're going to be talking about the upcoming DLC, Ashes of Ariandel. Now before I get into the real meat of what we've seen in the trailers, I'm going to have to lay some groundwork. The DLC seems like it takes place in what is either the painted world that we went to in Dark Souls 1, or a new version of that. There's a bunch of references to the painted world in the original game, the most obvious ones being the Corvians we find all over Lothric. The Corvians offer salvation to forlorn souls by telling them tales of the painted world, which is referenced by the narrator.
Unkindled one, if you are like us, another forlorn soul.
The Corvians seem to be transforming due to the presence of human dregs, or impure humanity. I'm going to summarize what that is, but if you want to know more you should check out my videos on the shackles of the gods and the pus of man. In Japanese culture there is this concept of impurity, which can come about either due to stagnation, as the result of performing spiritually unclean acts, or as a failure to purify oneself. This is a major theme in Bloodborne, in which corrupted blood is the major driver of the plot. All the Yanamites and Varbloods are drinking corrupted blood, which is both transforming them into beasts and drawing the attention of the Old Ones. The same sort of thing happens in Dark Souls 3 with the transformation into beasts. There's a bunch of enemies which are undead that have been hybridized with animals, like these crab women, the mangrubs, the Gru, and the Corvians. It even seems like impure humanity exists in blood. A bunch of dark-lined enemies in the game are weak to bleeding, and the notched whip in the cleansing chapel describes a sort of ritual bloodletting, something you do to expel impurity. So right away, in both the teaser and gameplay trailer, we're shown something very similar to the hollow trees that are on the high wall in Lothric. These hollow trees seem to be the intermediate form of the pilgrims that are turning into the pilgrim butterflies, or at the very least the branches of the hollow trees are foreshadowing the overall look of the pilgrim butterflies. Since the hollow tree in the trailers isn't exactly the same as the one in the high wall, it seems as if it's foreshadowing some sort of creature, possibly an enemy or a boss, later on in the DLC that'll look similar. Let's move on to what looks like the basic enemy we'll be fighting for at least the start of the DLC. These guys look pretty similar to the warrior set and Benhart set from Dark Souls 2. They all have nasal helms, chainmail, and capes that are a mix of fur and cloth. This suggests a connection to Mirror, which is further established by the larger versions of these enemies. They're wearing elk antlers, which the Elkhorn shield tells us is a symbol of Mirror. A post on Reddit pointed out another connection. The red-robed man who presents you with a piece of paper is wearing armor that looks very similar to Hodrick's. You can even see Hodrick's helmet fitting under his hood, and Hodrick uses the Sunset Shield, which was the Mirror Shield in Dark Souls 2. The Sunset Shield mentions that it's used by the Knights of the Sunless Realms, and we also have connections between the Sunless Realms and Irithyll. Cirrus seems to be an ex-Dark Moon, and the Sunless Talisman used to be the Dark Moon Talisman. There's also a bunch of connections between Irithyll and the Painted World. The original painting used to be there. It's become cold and frigid. You need a doll to get in, and Aldrich's soul can be used to make a miracle version of Priscilla's scythe. I don't exactly know what the connection is, but the Painted World, Mirror, the Sunless Realms, and Irithyll all seem to be closely related. On the subject of the red-robed man, we have an interesting caption on one of his pictures. An old man in a red hood respectfully holds out a dingy piece of cloth. Blood-red paint stains the cloth. Please show the fire to the lady, he asks you. This essentially confirms that he's the narrator. But the important part is the talk about the blood-red paint. We can see that he's actually in the cleansing chapel in the Cathedral of the Deep, and as I mentioned earlier, the cleansing chapel seems to have been used for bloodletting rituals that expelled impure humanity in the form of blood. If that's the case, then I'd say the blood-red paint is actually blood, and the painting that the painted world is in is either painted in tainted blood, or had blood spilled purposefully over it. The lady he seems to be talking about is referred to as a painter in some of the file names, and she sat in front of what appears to be an incomplete version of a painting. So maybe we need to give her the piece to get into the painted world, or maybe she's making a painted world inside of the painted world. These fly things also have a very interesting caption. Something grotesque and grim is wriggling in the darkness. It is said these infested things are feeding on the putrid remains of the world. This very much fits in what I've been talking about with regards to human dregs. These hollows have been infested with them, leading to this transformation, which is actually quite similar to the Corvians. where the Corvians have grown 2 sets of wings on their back, these things have grown a set of wings and a pair of arms. The blood we see them living in during the trailer is probably the blood that's dropped down onto the painting in the cleansing chapel. So maybe they got corrupted by drinking that impure blood. With her white hair, pale skin, and black robe, this boss looks a lot like the Firekeeper in Firelink. I think what a lot of people immediately thought of was Lady Maria. I think that's probably accurate, at least in the sense that I think this is a way for the developers to give some sort of insight into the character of the Firelink Firekeeper, in the same way that Maria did so for the doll. The permanent members of Firelink, including the Firekeeper, were basically impenetrable mysteries, so any information is going to be welcome. The best theory I could come up with for the Firelink Firekeeper is that she might be another sister of Lorien and Lothrix. That's really just based on her having the same grey hair and white skin as them, and her crown looking as if it forms a matching set with Lorien's, which is not exactly a watertight case. In our opening cinematic, the boss Firekeeper talks about,
"'Tis only the flame quivering at misguided ash,"
which you can interpret as talking about us. We, the Ashen One, are the misguided ash the flame was quivering before. In that vein, then when the narrator says this,
The ashes have come at last.
he could be talking about us, which I guess would make the player the ashes of Ariandel. Now this boss, or possibly just the second stage of the Firekeeper boss, has been speculated to be All-Father Lloyd, based on the name of his screenshots having Father in the title. That's certainly possible, but I think there's a lot more that we can dig into. The caption of this picture reads, "A man is strapped down to a chair and is peering into the depths of a large golden cistern. What does he see when he gazes into the darkness?" Now the interesting part about that is we're told that he's looking into the darkness in the golden vessel that he's holding. But when we are actually fighting him, it's filled with what is some sort of fiery molten liquid, maybe even Estus. So it seems it gets filled with fire when we start fighting him, after the Firekeeper battle. With this scene of the blood going into the golden vessel, and this streak of blood on the floor when you fight him, it seems like the vessel gets filled with flame when the Firekeeper dies, and her blood goes into it. So the flame she's talking about is actually inside of her. Now if the Firekeeper's blood goes into it, maybe this is specifically a vessel for holding blood. The darkness that he's initially looking into, then, is actually blood containing impure humanity. That certainly fits with the first shot we get of him flagellating himself. In a similar manner to the cleansing chapel rituals, he's cleansing himself of tainted blood, which, since he looks like a giant Corvian, he would have, and placing it into the vessel. The really interesting thing is that this is extremely similar to what happens when we give the Firelink Firekeeper her eyes back. The crown that the Firekeeper wears seems to be pushing black goo, presumably human dregs, into her eyes, and this gives her visions of the end of the Age of Fire. This means both this boss and the Firelink Firekeeper are looking into human dregs in search of visions, so I'm very eager to find out more about this boss. Now if the flame we're supposed to be getting for the painter, as the narrator asks us, is in the blood of the Firekeeper, it's possible that we're just getting it so we can complete her painting. If you actually look at her pose, she seems to be holding up her hands in front of the blank canvas, as if she's expecting to feel warmth from it. But another possibility follows on what the motivations of the red-robed man are. From the description of the Sunset Shield, Shield of the Holy Knights of the Sunless Realms, engraved with a brilliant flame crest that burns brightly within the Order's customary sunset colors. This design symbolizes those who both harbor and oppose the power of flame. So if he's a member of Hodrick's Order, as I speculated before, it's possible he is having us go after the flame in order to contain it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Just a bit of housekeeping before we finish. I have a new microphone, so I will be going back and redoing my 2 previous videos. The Shackles of the Gods video will also have a bunch of new content, including a bunch of stuff about the Deep. Stay tuned.